Hi, everybody. Welcome. Welcome to the Spring Fever Garden Forums, where we connect you, the gardener, with the experts at North Dakota State University. My name's Tom Kolb. I'm an extension horticulturist in the Department of Plant Sciences. This is the third of our four Spring Fever Garden Forums, and tonight our theme is soils and weeds. Now, the format that we use tonight is the one that we always use. We'll start with about a 20-minute presentation, followed by 10 to 15 minutes of questions and answers. And we really do want your participation in this event. So if you have a question, just slide your mouse down to the bottom of the screen and a Q&A box should appear. And then all you have to do is type in your question in the Q&A box, and I will get to as many questions as possible. Please make sure your question is relevant to the topic at hand, and we'll do our best to stay on time. So let's get started with our first presentation. Let's talk about a new approach to gardening. Many growers have stopped using rototillers and switched to no-till gardening. Here to tell us what the hype is all about is Kelsey Deckert. Kelsey is the Extension Horticulture Agent in Burleigh County. She enjoys teaching youth and adults about gardening, and she enjoys working one-on-one with the public about any landscape concerns that they have. Kelsey, welcome to the forums.
Hey, Tom, thank you. As always, I enjoy presenting for the Spring Fever Forum. So I will go ahead and we're going to get started. I'll share my screen and kick tonight off, I guess. So as Tom said, tonight I'm going to talk to you guys about what I call minimal till gardening. A lot of times people are going to hear it as no-till gardening, but I like to say minimal because you do have to work the soil a little bit. And I will tell you, I'm by no means an expert in this area, but I have become really knowledgeable over the last few years in the minimal till approach. And I have to give credit tonight to Menoken Farm, Burleigh County Soil Conservation District for allowing me to use some of their photos from Menoken Farm in my slides tonight. So the question is that I get is, why do we till a garden? And I would say first and foremost that everybody is going to say that they want to till a garden is going to be for that weed suppression. Um, I will be the first to admit, last summer, I don't know about you, but I have raised beds. I do raised bed gardening, and I had just grassy weeds that it seemed like no matter how much effort, how much time I tried to spend in the garden, I couldn't get them all the way out. I just dealt with them. And, sometimes you have to learn when it's time to say goodbye and goodnight. And I did that middle of summer last year. The weeds had overcome my garden and I couldn't take it anymore. So I completely covered it with landscape fabric. So that's one reason to till a garden. Another reason, and a lot of homeowners will do this, is to be able to incorporate organic material, especially when they do that till in the spring or in the fall. They like to add that in. And then of course, it's going to make it easy to plant in. It breaks up the soil. I mean, I will admit too, anytime you go to a nicely tilled garden, that soil is almost just like fluff or like pillow stuffing. It's so nice to work in. It makes it very easy. And of course, you don't have any weeds, like I said earlier. And then lastly, we also would till to add in oxygen. So those are the main reasons that we're going to till a garden and go that route, the traditional way of gardening. So the next question we would ask is why to consider no-till gardening? First and foremost is going to be soil health. Okay. You want a healthy soil. This might be a way to consider that no-till approach, that minimal till. So what's going to happen to our health of the soil is we're going to get increased organic matter. We're going to get increased soil organisms. We'll have improved water percolation and drainage in there. It also is going to improve soil aerations, and it's going to have better root development. And finally, it's going to have better resistance to wind and water erosion. So one thing that people don't know either is even if you have been tilling your garden for years, some of those weed seeds can lay dormant in the soil for many years. And then when you actually are in tilling, they're going to come to the surface by the blades of that tiller work in that soil. And also it can make it a little more compact. So, if I've maybe given you some reasons to consider that minimal till approach this year, let's go ahead and let's talk about how you can start or convert your garden to no-till. So, first, just kind of like we recommend anyways, starting a garden, you can do a burn down of an area. So that's going to be, like I said, starting a new patch. Maybe you have a brand new area. Maybe you got a new piece of lawn. Maybe you've bought a house and you actually want to get a garden going. So what I would say is if you're going to start in the fall, like I have noted here, cut that grass short. And then we want to go ahead and use glyphosate. That is the active chemical. The reason we want to do that is it doesn't have any soil residual in it. And I do have to caution today, like I have the picture of Roundup. That's what most people are going to say, oh, I can just round up that area. But there's a lot of different chemical formulations of Roundup out there. And so you're going to want to look for glyphosate as the active chemical. And it's great because, like I said, no soil residual in there. You know, you can get that area completely where the grass or vegetation that's there completely dead, and then you can go ahead and get planting in it, you know, like 10 to 14 days after. Another route you can try in a new area is called solarization. And so I don't have the picture of that right there, but what you would do is you're going to cover the area with a clear plastic for at least 10 days. Now, I will just say clear plastic isn't going to be the most ideal way to start it, but what happens is that clear plastic takes out the air needed for the plants to survive. So essentially, it's going to suffocate that area. What I would actually say is let's go ahead and let's use a black tarp or cardboard because that will deprive the sunlight, okay? And so you're going to leave that just like in this picture here, you can see you're going to go ahead and cover it up. And then two, you're probably going to have to leave it a couple of weeks. So great thing is, hey, if you guys are looking at doing this, you got time right now to go ahead and try this out. And so then what you would see is after you take it off, all that vegetation has died off. All right. So again, another thing that we can do is if we are looking at just converting to a no-till garden, we want to go ahead and we want to stop tilling as soon as possible. We want to remove any disease material, but you can leave healthy material on there. One of the biggest things that I'm going to talk about in a couple slides is the big thing with minimal till is we want to make sure the soil is covered at all times. And so the landscaping fabric. This might be for those of you who love that manicured look. All right. So I got the steps there. We're going to go ahead and cover with landscape fabric. So that's exactly what I did with my raised bed. And so this is going to be the first year of me doing a minimal till approach in a raised bed with landscape and fabric. I never tilled my raised beds the past couple years. I would just plant directly in the soil and stuff and then do my best at keeping up the weeds around them. So I would recommend when you do get that all laid down, as you can see, this picture is really nice. In this area, you can see maybe they use bricks to hold that landscape and fabric down. I just use like the landscaping staples in mine and put them down throughout I have just a smaller garden, so I use that throughout. But you can even go ahead and add like some compost on the sides of those to hold the landscaping fabric down just to aid in the wind, especially if you have an area that's not going to be well covered. So then I would say let's go ahead and let's use a propane torch to make the holes for planting seeds or even transplants. You can go ahead and use like a utility knife and cut holes, but the reason a propane torch is going to be a little bit better is you're not going to get those frayed ends around there that are going to rip. So then you're going to go ahead and plant directly in the holes that you made. And of course, you may still get some weeds in that exposed area. So consider mulching around the plant once it's emerging and growing. And then the other thing to know too with this method is you may have to remove it every few years and add in some organic matter as well. But you want to make sure, again, select landscaping fabric that the water is going to be able to move through when you are watering your garden. Now, another popular method, and I've actually had quite a few master gardeners locally here in Burleigh County tell me that this is their jam for doing their minimal till. So you're going to cover your ground with newspaper, cardboard like you see on there, and you're going to spread in 1 to 2 inches of green material. We'll talk about that in the next slide. And then you're going to add in brown material 1 to 2 inches. And you're going to build that up, just like as if you think of making a lasagna at home. You know, you have noodles, meat and sauce, cheese, noodles. You're going to keep building that up. And essentially, this is going to be a compost that you make that's going to continue to break down. So this pile could grow up to 2 to 3 feet in height, but it's going to continue to shrink down into that compost. The great thing is you don't need to turn this. It is going to be a very slow process compared to a hot compost, but it does work. So I mentioned those brown and green materials. Here is some ideas for those materials. So brown, that's going to provide our carbon that is needed. I'm not going to get way into the compost and carbon cycle, but that is going to be dried leaves, aged hay, straw, newspaper, chipped wood, dried grass, shredded paper, sawdust. Those are some examples. And then, of course, your greens are going to provide that nitrogen. So veggie scraps, fruit peels or rinds, coffee grounds, manure, fresh grass, green plants like plant material, and eggshells. So the one thing in the green material that I have to caution people is fresh grass and manure. If you're using grass clippings, you need to make sure that that lawn has not been sprayed. If you're going to go and collect grass clippings from a lawn that has been sprayed, you are going to see herbicide injury in those plants. And the same way goes with manure. Again, if you're getting it sourced from a local producer, you need to ask them if they ever spray their pastures because, again, a cow or a horse isn't going to break that down as it goes through their body. So just pay attention to those things. All right, so it's going to be easy enough to go ahead and collect that organic matter to do this lasagna method. And so again, go ahead. Maybe fall is going to be better. You could find that leaves that have fallen on the ground, wood chips, bark, corn stalks. Start collecting newspaper, cardboard, compost. I know one thing I've learned over the last couple years too is like one of the bigger no-till gardeners in the United States. He actually spoke at an event that I hosted with soil conservation here in Burleigh County, and he said people do ask him about, you know, you get all these cardboard boxes like Amazon boxes and concerned about maybe like the inks in there. He has not, and I've kind of researched too, haven't found anything where you'd have to worry about like that print that's on there that says maybe Amazon. So you're going to go ahead and you're going to layer that mulch 8 to 10 inches. Some advice to have for this is, like I said, I would rather call it minimal till because there is going to be some soil disturbance on here. One thing you can think about is creating living walkways, and I'll talk about that in a couple slides. The biggest thing for this approach is keeping that ground covered at all times. That is going to keep your soil protected from any type of wind or rain erosion. You know, this year too, we didn't have a lot of rain or moisture coming off of winter going into the spring. So this minimal till is also going to be better for conserving moisture as well in the ground. You still want to be able to rotate your crops within that garden. So again, just like you would in your traditional garden, make sure that you are putting them around. And then utilize cover cropping. And I will touch on this in a couple slides as well. So then the question is, how do we put that garden to bed in the fall? It's going to be different, right? We're not going to clean everything out. So if you were to have any type of diseased material, we do want to get that out of there because we want to eliminate any sources of fungus. Or if you had a really bad insect problem too, you might look at pulling some of that material because it can, be a shelter or harbor insects. You're going to go ahead and you can cut those plants if you kind of want to have more of a cleanly look to it. Cut those other plants back down to the ground level. Those roots are going to decompose over winter. And then, of course, you can, like I said, consider cover crops. And I can't say it enough, it's important to always have that soil covered. So what are some types of cover crops? So again, here's some photos from Minokan Farm. This was inside their high tunnel, and you can see that they have a cover crop that they planted. You can see carrots on the left and sweet potatoes on the right. And so all this is that they utilized in these photos is winter rye, and they used it because it germinates in the fall and then it's going to bounce back and germinate yet in the spring before planting. So you can have that come up again, benefit the soil because those roots are gonna go in there, and maybe sometimes too, if you're heavy on some of those heavy nitrogen feeders, you might need to select something that's going to put some nitrogen back into the soil. But then what you would go ahead and do in the springtime is you can just go ahead and cover this back up and deprive it of that sunlight, like I said, or use solarization and basically kill off that cover crop again, and then you just plant directly into it. You can work with a lot of local seed sources. I know here, Bismarck Mandan area, we do have some local seed houses that can supply some cover crops. And even looking out online, Amazon, I notice, has some other options. And one of their options that looked like a pretty good mixture again was called Outside Fried Garden Way Cover Crop. So that was a mixture of triticale, peas, oats, vetch, and annual ryegrass. Okay, so that's just an example. But again, work with some of your local seed houses and seed sources. Now, I mentioned having live-in pathways. And so one thing that might be helpful if you do have a larger garden and you are wanting to, you know, have kind of more of a manicured look, maybe a little more shape to it and doesn't look so messy, because another thing that I will tell you, we toured a no-till garden outside of Mandan, and I had a lot of gardeners, and my grandma was one of them, and I thought she about had a heart attack looking at it. She's like, that's so messy. I don't even see the plants. And so living pathways is just going to help create more of that, like just shape and flow to it so it looks a little more manicure. So one thing you could do, again, in a larger one, you could leave that native grass and then make it just as big enough if you have a push mower or even a riding lawn mower, make it big enough for your mower to go through. Clovers are going to work really well. Mallow, calomel, any of those really ground creeping type of plants will work really well. I like adding the clover and the chamomile as well, just because, again, that's going to attract some of our pollinators. So like I have in here, you may consider mowing and you may consider hoeing the edges as well. So sometimes with these living pathways, some of the challenges can be that encroachment, especially if you are in a year of drought. So you might get an edger if you really want to be like big time with it. Or you can even try, putting like a row of mulch in between to create a better walkway as well. One thing that these living pathways are going to help with is if you have like a sloping area or a low area, that if you are putting mulch within your minimal till garden, it's going to not have that water puddling or where that um, mulch gets washed away. So, resource for additional information, Jesse Frost. I put his contact on there. He is very well versed in a no-till guide, and that is a book that he has, and he also has a podcast. And so I have went in and I've listened to him on some of his featured shows that he does on YouTube. And despite being in a different region of the country and stuff, he has a lot of good, insightful tips and advice for anyone out there looking at moving or converting to a minimal till garden. So with that, I will just tell you guys thank you, and I am here to entertain questions.
Here's one. Is it fresh grass okay to use for cover if you wait 3 mowings after spraying grass for weeds?
So it can be, but you definitely need to look at that label. That label usually will say on there, general rule of thumb is around 3 to 4 mowings, but you need to look at what that residual time is going to be on there.
It's with all these. Tonight we're going to talk a lot about herbicides, and there's all kinds of questions about that. That's why it's more important than ever that you read the label. And
Very
the,
much.
the most common lawn herbicides now are a combination, like a trimec combination. And it will often say now you cannot use those clippings, period. Those old days of just 2,4-D are over. That's when you can mow after 3 times. But
Yes.
that's when I was a teenager. Those days are over. Okay. Now you mentioned clover and chamomile in a walkway. Is
Yep.
that going to hold up in a walkway?
Yeah, so that is one of the walkways that, like I referenced Jesse there, he talks about. And if anybody knows, I mean, if you've ever grown chamomile, that stuff just goes crazy. So again, you might have to edge that. But it grows in thick that I wouldn't worry about that.
Okay. You made a comment that tilling a garden is a good way to suppress weeds, but you also mentioned that tilling a garden is a good way to have more weeds because you stimulate seeds to germinate.
Correct.
So it goes both ways, huh?
It certainly does.
And what does
Certainly
what
does.
does that rototiller do to those worms this person's concerned about?
The worms,
Yeah,
I'm
those
sure
precious worms.
yeah, I'm sure it can eat them up.
That's
Not
right.
be very good. So, yeah,
That's right.
definitely, it depends on how deep and everything you're going. So, not great for the worms.
That's right. I don't want to be a worm when I hear a rototiller coming nearby because it's not like those snakes. You cut off a snake's tail or a salamander comes back. A worm, that's the end of
Done.
that guy. Okay. The question is, we got to talk about glyphosate, and is it going to be available in garden centers or big box stores? Now, it is available to farmers through their suppliers. Let's talk about glyphosate for a second, Kelsey, and Roundup,
Yeah. Tom, I'm going to defer to you. I know you have mentioned, I think it got banned in Canada, correct?
Well, I
But
just say that,
not locally, or I mean, not in the United States. It hasn't been completely banned.
well, here's the deal with Roundup and Monsanto. Monsanto's tired of paying lawsuits.
Yes.
So they just said we don't need it. We don't they disagree that it caused cancer or Hodgkin's lymphoma, but Monsanto says it's not worth the pain anymore. So they changed their vegetation killer Roundup now, and it's a combination. The glyphosate's out, but it's got like diquat triclopyr and it's a hard one, fluazifop. But the whole key there, you have to read the label again carefully because this new formulation of Roundup you can't use in a vegetable garden. Okay, so you got to be careful. So glyphosate is still available at garden centers. It's still available at big box stores, but like under a generic brand, you can buy 41% glyphosate generically at a big box store, and and farmers still have access to it, and so do you as a gardener. So it's
I'm
just
sure Jeff will have more to say about that
yeah, we
later
got a lot
tonight.
about
He's
that.
the expert there.
Yeah, we got a lot of stuff going on. Um, Okay, what do you do to keep mice or rodents out of your walkways?
Oh, great question. So this is again just from gardeners that I know have moved to this minimal till, no till. Um, there's a gentleman that lives actually northeast of our place and has a very large garden, and he's got some very good thicket in there as well. So he actually does have some mouse traps set up throughout his garden, more on the edges and stuff. And he has told me he has seen snakes in there, but he welcomes the snakes because they help with the mice problem. But he has set that up. And so if you're like me, I know one thing that my husband has talked about is no dig potatoes. And that is not something I want to invite is mice in a larger area with no dig potatoes and stuff because they use like alfalfa and everything like that. So if mice is not your forte and stuff, you definitely probably, going into that winter, like I said, cut it way back to the ground, but leave those roots intact.
Yeah. How about a garden cat?
That too are a good garden dog. I have
There it
those.
goes. How about will deer eat your living pathway?
Anything, a deer will eat anything if it's hungry enough.
Okay,
Maybe
so
put up a fence around it. Again, get a dog that barks. There is liquid fence out there, but that's gonna smell. So there's options, but it depends. I always tell people one strategy for managing deer in the garden is make sure you put your garden in an area that's like high traffic. That's gonna just help keep them away in general.
right, and with mice or deer, you can think about fencing around your garden, exclusion as an
Mm-hmm.
approach. Just have to use a fine mesh with mice, I guess, and maybe dig it 6 inches deep. Okay, there's a lot of love for worms tonight. Does landscape fabric affect worms?
As far as what, I don't know what that specific question is, but I don't know that it would affect anything with the worms. I mean, they live below the ground, so
It'll be okay.
they'll be okay.
Okay, how long does the lasagna method take to compost? Or do you just go ahead and plant right in that stuff?
Yeah, so you would start, like I said, in the garden and stuff. So you're gonna cover an area outside, right? And you're gonna kind of build that up and let it break down and everything. If you want to do it where you are starting a lasagna method that you can plant in right away, I would just suggest like actually having a ready to go compost that you would put on top of that cardboard and then have your season and then get that layers starting and stuff.
Does this minimal till gardening, does the original soil texture make a difference? Like, does it matter if I have a sandy soil or a loamy soil or a clay soil?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you have those kind of things going on in your soil and maybe you aren't able to grow some things, then you might want to look at really getting some compost moving on in that area. So you might definitely have some issues till you build that soil health back, by getting some organic matter back in that area and stuff. But I wouldn't say like down the road you can work with it. It's just to start, yeah, you're probably gonna have some issues if you've had issues with the traditional garden there.
Okay, speaking of issues, this person has a nearby oak tree and the oak roots are coming into nearby the raised bed boxes. Of course, if I had my rototiller, I could really rip those roots
So they're coming under the boxes or they're coming next to the boxes
in. So,
in.
so underneath
Mm,
and coming in.
okay. I don't know if they're specifically like starting to set little seedlings up or not.
No,
But that if no,
no, I think they're just like penetrating underneath and they're sprouting up. There
I
could be
don't.
some acorns and seedlings.
Yeah, I mean, if you're not getting like seedlings and stuff, I wouldn't worry too much about just the roots going under
Yeah.
there.
I just say you have to make a choice in your life. What's more important, that stupid oak tree or your garden? So cut down that oak tree. Who needs it? or on the other end, a few, to be honest, um, cutting a few roots off the oak tree, slicing a little bit, at the edge of the raised bed won't won't kill a tree.
Yeah.
Okay, how about the aeration effects of no-till? How does that improve aeration, or you're never
Right.
tilling it?
So if you're adding those cover crops and you're leaving that material in, like I said, you're not putting those roots out. Those roots are naturally creating, space and more pore space underneath the ground as well to create like a natural aeration in the soil.
Here's this person likes a rototiller. She says, doesn't tilling up my garden soil in spring warm up the soil faster?
Are you sure that's not you asking that question? I know you like the rototiller too, right?
I'm sorry, I'm not a. I'm like
That's okay.
it can't teach an old dog new tricks.
That's
And my
right.
rototiller go a long ways together.
Yeah. So obviously tilling, yes, you're gonna bring stuff up that would probably warm up the soil a little bit. The idea again is, in that area of that no-till and everything like that, especially if you are using like the fabric method and stuff, that also is gonna have some of that heat to help warm up the soil earlier.
Okay. How long does black fabric, landscape fabric, how long does that last on my no-till bed?
Yeah, good question. So I don't know the personal experience, but from what I've heard, again, from others, you can definitely get a couple years out of it, especially if you're gonna, create kind of those holes that you will plant in, but you're gonna rotate your crops throughout as well. I would say probably 2, 3 years, to have like a good solid where it's not really getting frayed away and everything like that.
Okay, so in a normal till garden and you're growing carrots, do those carrots grow straight and long, or they get
Down in
all
a
crooked?
no-till.
Yeah,
Yeah, yes. So again, you're gonna rotate and everything, but yeah, they're still gonna grow straight down. You're not gonna have issues with that. Even like that picture that I showed from Minokan with the cover crop of the winter rye and stuff. So those roots don't extend nearly down like a carrot root does. And so the only thing I would say is just in general, like, planting your root crops, you're not going to put two root crops next to each other that it could affect the way they grow.
just make sure they're not too crowded. I
Right,
saw
thin
you
them
use
out.
pelleted seed there in your picture there. Pelleted seed can help with carrots to prevent sprouting. How about all these chemicals we talked about? Do I have to get a private applicator's license to use this stuff?
Not the stuff that's available at garden centers. Again, I don't know all the listing of those that you would need it. Jeff can probably answer that one later, but again, like that generic glyphosate that was mentioned, no, you don't need a private applicator's license to apply.
Okay, we
They
also
usually
have
are going to say restricted use pesticide on them.
right. I'm not going to go to a big box store and find a restricted use chemical. They're not going to ask for your show your license at the checkout
Yeah,
desk. Had to just a long comment here about manure. That's got to be careful using manure
you bet.
with manure that was from a animal that was feeding on pasture grass that was
Correct.
sprayed upon with a one of these chemicals with a long
Chemicals.
residual life.
Yeah, like I know an example that a lot of times people will use like milestone in their pasture. And I
Wow.
think that one has like no grazing restrictions on it. So again, the animals, when they're consuming those plants that have been sprayed with that, it's not going through their body and breaking down. It doesn't get broken down and then come out in their waste. It's still going to have that residual. So I mean, honestly, these questions look like we're gearing up for Jeff later tonight.
Well, but you're the warm up act, that gets everybody interested. We
That's right.
gotta have a
The
great.
opener.
You got the opener that gets everybody excited. We'll get Jeff
Oh,
later.
looks like Rick's on tonight. Look at that. You would need a license if you custom spray or get compensated for spraying. He would know. He's a weed officer out in Oliver County.
Okay, so but that's you're being paid for spraying. This isn't like your own personal raised bed. Okay, what else? This person with the oak tree issues, the whole raised bed is full of oak roots. So what would you do about that?
Like you said, either move the bed at this point
Oh, that's not a bad idea.
or
Yeah, how
you know
about
what?
like if you had like if it's really this bad, if you had like let's say a 10-inch raised bed, you could put a bottom to the raised bed, an impervious bottom where the roots could not climb up
Right.
into. So there's ways to get around that. Oaks are very sensitive to construction injury. I was just making a joke. Be careful with oak trees, and you don't want to. They are precious. Let's see if you got any more questions here. Well, what's a good source for arborist mulch? Well, you can use
Once
that
you
for a
can,
walkway too.
you can, and you can talk to like you could talk to local forestry areas or even I know like Parks and Rec.
Yep.
They take down a lot of trees and mulch them up.
This person in their minimal till garden has some grasses coming through their perennials. Is that a good way to deal with that?
Not really, no. Like I said, that was a struggle in my regular garden last year and stuff. Um, you might have to put some fabric down or put some heavy mulch in that area. You're always going to have issues with that, and so some of those grasses have some very strong root systems, and you might have to make that choice again if you are going to do some spot spray in there, or if you are going to get a hoe out and dig it out.
Yep. Like a spot spray of a vegetation killer like glyphosate again.
Correct.
But make sure it's a spot spray, right? Don't get it on your
Yeah.
precious perennials. Okay, Kelsey, thank you for getting off to a great start.